A New Mexico landlord is unable to evict her tenant from the place where she planned on retiring. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fate of yet another landlord who has been negatively impacted by the eviction moratorium. Okay, so this story is coming out of New Mexico, and it really is another sad case because she just was basically left hanging by this tenant who she only gave a 6-month lease to, and it's already been 4 months beyond that, and they're still there. They can't get rid of them. So New Mexico still has a state eviction moratorium that's in place right now, and unfortunately there is no end date to it. Okay, so I don't know if what they were thinking when they passed this, but there's no end date to the New Mexico state eviction moratorium. So landlords there who have tenants who aren't paying, they're just out of luck. But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Do you think that it's cool that New Mexico has no end date to their state eviction moratorium? I mean, what is going on in New Mexico? I mean, I had no clue that it was such a progressive place here, kind of more in the middle of the country. It's just kind of crazy the things that are going on there. Okay, I mean, just nuts. So this article comes from krqe.com, and it says, problem tenant, landlord fed up, says property is causing a fire hazard. And let's see exactly what this story says. A Roswell landlord says her tenant is trashing her property and he hasn't paid rent for months. The property owner, who wanted to remain anonymous, says she's been told she can't do much about it. It's been a problem many people are facing since the pandemic started. It really has caused a fire hazard with the weeds grown up, and I understand that they are growing up that fence. I had pipe fencing and goat wire on the inside, said the property owner. Her frustration has grown over time as she just wants to be able to sell the property and focus on her recovery, as she had fallen ill earlier this year. I was getting my property ready to sell, and then I got real sick and then had to fly out here to Tennessee for the surgery at the end of February, and he came right after that, she said. Wow. So, looks like she's got a lot going on, okay? A lot of stuff going on. She's got a medical condition, is getting surgery, and we got a tenant in her property that isn't paying, isn't taking care of the place, and just basically trashed it, okay? So what a common story this is. We got landlords who own just 1 or 2 properties, and they're getting punished by this eviction moratorium. They can't get these tenants out of the places. Either they're not eligible for the rental assistance, or they just don't want to apply. They don't want to cooperate and actually get the rental assistance. And so the landlord just has to pay all their own bills and continue to keep that tenant in the property on their dime. And wow, I mean, this can ruin anyone. As part of their rental agreement, the tenant was to take care of the property and the attached pasture in exchange for reduced rent, but there has been no care. The property is now in a state of disarray. It was supposed to be my retirement home. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It has 6 acres, water rights, nut, and fruit trees. It was just what I always wanted and intended to stay there for the rest of my life until I got sick, she said. Now, even the county is unsure how they can help. New Mexico still has an eviction moratorium in place. Basically, landlords can't evict tenants for non-payment of rent if a person is impacted financially by the pandemic. The landlord says that isn't the case here, and the tenant is just taking advantage. It's not about money, but also the work he promised to do. It's bad enough that she decided to go ahead and give him reduced rent as long as he took care of the property, but then he's like, well, I can't even pay the reduced rent. So it sounds to me like this tenant is just taking advantage of this landlord, okay? So I hate to hear this story. I mean, this was this lady's retirement house, okay? This is where she planned to just go and just live out the rest of her life. And unfortunately, that plan, threw a wrench in the plan, not only her illness, but also the eviction moratorium. So this has created a nightmare for her instead, okay? So this is happening all over the country. This is happening in every place right now, okay? So the landlords, even in states where they weren't, where there weren't state eviction moratoriums in place, they still weren't able to recover the lost rent from when the federal eviction moratorium was in place. So there's a lot of landlords who are out tens of thousands of dollars right now, and it's just not fair. I don't think that we're ever going to be able to recover that money. I don't think that the landlords are ever going to be able to get any of that money back, and it's just unfortunate, okay? I don't believe that these rental assistance programs are truly working for everybody. In fact, I don't think they're hardly working for anyone. So, well, let's see what the rest of this article says here. However, county officials say they aren't sure how to handle it. This issue with her and her tenant is new to us. We don't have a case similar, and we haven't had a precedent case in this matter, said Luis Jaramillo, Chavez County Planning and Zoning Director. County officials say they're basically in a wait-and-see mode. Some states have resumed evictions, but the New Mexico Supreme Court ruled earlier this year the moratorium here would remain in place. They didn't set a time limit. Why didn't they set a time limit, okay? I mean, think about it. I mean, how long do landlords have to wait? I mean, really, especially for these landlords who aren't going to get any rental assistance. How long do they have to wait before they're able to get these tenants out of their properties? 6 months? 7 months more? I mean, come on. There has to be a time limit. Otherwise, it's just basically written into state law that you could never evict your tenants and your tenants never have to pay, as long as they were affected by the pandemic. And it would be pretty easy to say that you were affected by the pandemic. I mean, there's not like there's any way for a landlord to prove otherwise. That's one of my biggest gripes with all of this. I mean, I'm like, hey, how do you prove otherwise? Like, shouldn't the tenant be forced to prove that they are affected by the pandemic before they're actually covered by any of these protections? Not that I think the protection should be in place in the first place, but I mean, this whole thing was it was a giant a money grab against the landlords, because they thought landlords had plenty of money and they wanted to get their votes, and it has nothing to do with any illnesses or any of the pandemic stuff going on, okay? It had to do with trying to get votes, trying to appease as many people as possible, and trying to pass more socialist laws, and that's it.